among the captives are your aunties. They're your nursemaids, the one who raised you up. These same women who rejected the Prophet ﷺ, they were invoking them. Now they're calling him, these are your aunties who are here. So out of mercy to them, free these people. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, I free my share of the captives, and because the captives had been distributed to integrate with the Muslims. And all of the Muslims freed their captives. The entire tribe went free, and they all became Muslim at that act of generosity. Angels bathed his heart in Zamzam and replaced it in his chest. Those around him knew this blessed child was different from the rest. Raised by Uncle Abu Talib after both his parents died. Though an orphan in his early years, Allah was by his side. Abu Talib, he raised the Prophet ﷺ when he was young. Abu Talib used to say that when we eat food without Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ, we're always hungry because he wasn't so well off. He says, but when he joins us, we all feel satiated. And there are reports in our books of Sirah in which the Prophet ﷺ, all the children of the house of Abu Talib would wake up with crust in their eyes, disheveled hair, like normal people wake up. The Prophet ﷺ, it is said, would wake up completely clean in his eyes as though he had put kuhl in his eyes. Oiled hair, as if it was, subhanAllah, as if he was so mubarak, that they knew that this child was something different completely right from the beginning. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was protecting him, so that he could not do any sins in his childhood for the mission that was to come later. Allah, He protected him and saved him from the evil and obscene. So trustworthy was he known to be, they called him Al-Amin. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, alayhi salatullah. So we have to fast forward in the interest of time. But subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, as he grew and grew, and he became known to have the best character of his society. In fact, people who had sacred insight, meaning they had received the previous scriptures, if they saw the Prophet ﷺ as a child, our books of Sirah tell us that they would recognize that this is the last prophet to come. And when the Prophet ﷺ finally received his revelation, and Jibreel ﷺ brought down the revelation to his heart, the Prophet ﷺ was very scared. Why was he scared? Not because he was scared for himself. Our ulama say that when he was told that you are the witness over all mankind, over all of humanity, he said he was afraid of the responsibility of having to be the judge over all of humanity. And so subhanAllah, then the Prophet ﷺ began to call, and they tortured him. And they would oppress him so badly that when the Prophet ﷺ, subhanAllah, he would call the people to Allah and day and night implore, if you love Allah, then follow me, He'll love you even more. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبُكُمُ اللَّهُ. Right? Say, if you love Allah, then follow me, He'll love you even more. At that time, he didn't ask anybody to love him, because they were opposing him. So he's saying to the Quraysh, you people claim to love God. If you love God, then follow me wholeheartedly. Meaning, ittiba is not just generally. Follow me in everything I'm saying. Allah will love you much, much more. Yuhbibkum Allah. It's an intensive form, and Allah will forgive your sins. But they still tortured him. Once the pagans threw some waste on him as he bowed down in prayer. They were laughing while his daughter cried, but he did not despair. Because once he was making sajda in the Kaaba, and the Quraysh were sitting there mocking him, and they said, which of you dares to take these guts of this rotting sheep and the blood and the guts and go and put it on the back of Muhammad ﷺ as he is bowing down in sajda, which is he's in the most, a prophet, Rasulullah, making sajda to Allah in front of the Kaaba, the most holy sight you've probably ever seen. And someone came, the most wretched of them came and took the filth and put it on the blessed back of Rasulullah ﷺ. He didn't even move. He didn't get up. Instead, it's his daughter who came to move everything away. This doesn't happen once, this happened multiple times. Where they would throw dust on the head of the Rasul ﷺ. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, they would throw, when he was praying, they would just take a whole bucket of sand and throw it all over him. So his entire eyes and his hair, his Mubarak beard were covered in sand. He would come into the house. And I want you to imagine if a father comes home and his children see him like that. and his daughters would burst out in tears. And he would sit down, and they would be taking water and rubbing the hair and washing the dirt out of the hair of the Prophet ﷺ, crying. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Subhanallah, he would tell them, do not despair. Your Lord is with me. For Allah is with those people who put all their trust in Him. And the Lord was with His Prophet, peace and blessings be on him. One by one the hearts began to turn towards the guiding light, as Islam rescued the downtrodden and gave to them their rights. So subhanAllah, it's the people who are from the lowest aspect of society, who are most oppressed. They found so much relief in Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whether it was the slaves, we know Bilal, how he was tortured. And we know Sumayya and her family. They were people who are not of high status in Arab society. The Prophet ﷺ began to stop people from burying baby girls alive, which was unheard of. They used to bury the baby girls because they thought that they would be an oppression to them. And what happened? Instead, Rasulullah ﷺ, in that same generation of people who are burying their baby girls, he said, whoever of you has 3 daughters and brings them up properly and does well towards them, does ihsan towards them, will be like this with me in Jannah. Allahu Akbar. The same society that's burying baby girls. How do you give incentive to those people to respect girls and women? He says, you'll be like this with me in paradise. So anyone who has iman will take care of their daughters. And then they said, what about 2 daughters, Ya Rasulullah? He said, even 2. Then the narrator said, and if they had asked him for 1, we think he would have said, even 1. And the Prophet ﷺ, he squashed racism. He said, subhanAllah, when one of his companions, Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, spoke to address Bilal in an insulting way, oh you son of a black woman, that's what he said. Because Bilal was from Ethiopia, Abyssinia. And Bilal, what did he do? He went straight to the Prophet ﷺ. And he told the Prophet when he said that Rasulullah was very upset. And we have to ask ourselves, some of us are in cultures where we still refer to people of darker shade with rude words, or we look down on people. Up to today, this jahiliyyah is there. And the Prophet said to Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, Anta rajul fika jahil. And that's a very difficult thing to hear from Rasulullah. You are a man, there is still some ignorance, pre-Islamic ignorance inside you, meaning Islam has not completely come into your heart yet. And Abu Dharr al-Ghifari was so saddened by hearing this. He put his cheek on the ground, on the door of the masjid, and he said to Bilal, I swear you're not going to leave this masjid until you step over my cheek and then you go. Bilal refused because he was humble. He said, no, I don't need you to do that. And he said, no, you have to do it. And so Bilal did that just to make him feel atoned for it. The Prophet ﷺ, that same Bilal, when they came back to Makkah, what did he say? Who's going up on the Kaaba to give adhan? Bilal, you go up to give adhan. And as he climbed up, with putting his feet on the curtain of the Kaaba, to climb up and then stood on top of the Kaaba, let it be known that the first Muslim and believer to ever step foot on the Kaaba was a man from Africa, a black man from Africa. To the point where even some of the Quraysh who still had nifaq in their hearts, they were sitting far away. They had just become Muslim like a second ago. And they said, they were sitting around with Abu Sufyan, and they said, thank God my father did not live to see this day when a black man is on top of the Kaaba. And Abu Sufyan said, by that time he had learned is that he had learned, and he said, see me, I'm not going to say anything. Because if I say anything, these stones will inform me what I'm saying. The Prophet ﷺ was meters and yards away. He immediately turned around and looked at them and walked at a distance and came to them and said, did you say so and such and such and such? And they said, Ashhadu annaka Rasulullah. They said, we bear witness that you are Rasulullah, the messenger of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ took that racism away. And subhanAllah, this is how he brought up those people. Though Bilal was tortured in the sun, Sumayya put to death, still they held tight to their faith, and they would say till their last breath, La ilaha illallah, 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 Muhammadur Rasulullah, alayhi salatullah. To the point where, subhanAllah, the mercy that he had, as our Shaykh mentioned earlier, that is not just a mercy for the Muslims, he was a mercy lil alameen. Even the kafirs came under that. Even the kafirs. Can you imagine, subhanAllah, in previous ummahs, if you started to physically assault your prophet, if you tried to kill your prophet, if you even opposed your prophet in a way that was demeaning, SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what did he tell Lut alayhi salam? Leave by night, and he sent the punishment on those people. Same thing with the people of Ad and Thamud. They opposed their prophets, Allah destroyed them. And what did the Prophet, subhanAllah, the Quraysh, did such worse things to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, choked in his prayer, his family members killed, made destitute, made starving, and just called the worst names. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كُنَّا نُعَذِّبُهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ. We were not about to punish those people as long as you're there. So the Prophet ﷺ being alive among his ummah was not only for the benefit of the Muslims, but even the kuffar who were throwing stones at him, they were being kept alive only because his presence was too much of a mercy for the adab of Allah to come down at the same time. And so the Prophet ﷺ, even when he went to Ta'if, to call those people to Islam, he went just him alone with one other person, Zayd, one other person, to call a whole civilization, a whole town towards Islam. And he called the leaders to Islam, and we know the story. Instead of instead of refusing politely, what did they do? They chased him out of the town, throwing stones at him, until the point where, subhanAllah, it was said that Zayd was trying to shield the Prophet ﷺ, and his head was bleeding, and our Rasul ﷺ was bleeding so profusely that his shoes were clogged with blood. They made 2 lines going out of the city. And every time he would walk through past people, and they would hit him and stone him. He fell down, and they would take their hands underneath his armpits and raise him up and push him further down until he left and he collapsed in a garden outside of Ta'if. And that garden was owned even by his worst enemies from Mecca. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ made a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking for ease. And he said, but as long, everything that's happening to me, all the things that are going on, oh Allah, as long as you are not angry with me, I don't care. Meaning, if this is happening because I've done something wrong, then I'm asking for your forgiveness, and I'm asking for your help. But if this is just something that I have to go through to convey your message, then I don't even care what I have to go through. And that dua shook the heavens so much that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the angel down of that mountain and said, Allah has sent me, we've seen what's happened, what these people have done to you, just tell us and we'll bring the mountain down and destroy these people for what they did to you. And the Prophet ﷺ said no. Because if they don't worship Allah, then maybe from their generation, a generation will come, the next generation who will worship Allah. And subhanAllah, by the end, not even the next generation, by the end of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, those people of Ta'if, after not losing a battle, but it was a stalemate, they came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And they came to him and they asked them to accept Islam. Now the Prophet ﷺ at that time, look at the mercy. He could have said, you people who stoned me, you people who treated me like this, he didn't even mention it. The hadith he didn't even bring up. Remember that day? He didn't say anything. To others he did. Aisha said, what was the hardest day of your life? Was it Uhud? He said, no, it was the day of Ta'if when I was alone.